Hi, everybody, and welcome to the IVI webinar for Trustworthy AI. For this webinar, we are going to have 3 speakers in the area of artificial intelligence, and thanks to all our speakers. And I'm just going to shortly explain what's the scenario for today's webinar. Today, we are going to introduce an Erasmus Plus Trustworthy AI project, which is a collaboration between universities in different countries. And Manut University is a partner to this project. And by this, we are going to start and introduce the first speaker for today, who is Marcel Mora. And I'm going to have a short bio of Marcel for you. Dr. Marcel Mora Cantalups is an industrial and computer engineer, PhD in communication and information and technology in the Web Society by the University of Alcalá, Spain. Since 2018, he is an assistant professor of the computer science department of the University of Alcalá in Spain, and also member of the 14 Intelligent Innovation, Internet and Information Research Group. He is currently coordinating the Erasmus Plus Trustworthy AI project, and this webinar is related exactly to this project. I'm going to hand it over to Marcel to introduce the project. Thanks very much. Over to you, Marcel.
Okay, I will share my screen then, so you can see my slides. I think you can see them, right?
Yep.
Well, I have already been introduced, so there is no need to further introduce myself. But we are here in the end to present or to introduce the Trustworthy AI project, which is the project we are working on right now, which is, as Zore said right now, a collaboration between 7 institutions in Europe. And the thing is that artificial intelligence as a discipline or as a let's say a set of techniques, it's not a new field at all. The first works on artificial intelligence actually go back to mid last century, so the 50s, the 60s, but it has kind of recently taken off. Okay, this recently, I put it between, I mean, quoted, because it's like the last 20 years or so, and it has taken off mainly because the advances in technology, especially in computation and in electronics, has enhanced our capability to do things with artificial intelligence, no? And to process a lot of data and use this information to get insights or to get information from all this data that is available to us right now. Okay, the thing is that this actually reaches outside what is, let's say, only technical. Okay, so it goes to all aspects, to all fields in our daily lives, and this is something that is happening actually quite quickly in recent years. The thing is that artificial intelligence can be used and it can be adapted to execute multiple tasks, and these tasks can be in any sector or in any kind of company you can imagine, no? And often it results in an improvement of processes or of the efficiency of these processes, or even just making better decisions or more informed decisions that let's say individual humans could do, no? And the things that these benefits are hard to question actually nowadays. So we have all countries in the world like almost racing to take the best advantage possible of artificial intelligence. And in that sense, Europe is not an exception, no? And the thing is that Europe actually took an approach, and there is this communication for the artificial intelligence for Europe from 2018, which already stresses this point that artificial intelligence is something that it's already part of our lives, and it is even a bit optimistic in a way, because it starts with this idea of that artificial intelligence can help us for everything. No, so it's like a magical thing almost. You have this here in black, in bold type. No, the things that Europe is actually taking an approach which is slightly different or fundamentally different than other countries, in particular the ones from China or United States, in the sense that Europe is trying to do a more, let's say, democratic or a more value-based approach. No, and in particular there is a somehow and stress on the ethics of artificial intelligence, because what happens with all these opportunities that we have with artificial intelligence, that it has a lot of related risks. Okay, and the thing is that artificial intelligence can bring many benefits for us, but also has some things that need to be taken into account. No, so as soon as artificial intelligence becomes more common in our daily tasks, even the most mundane things, it also becomes more, let's say, dangerous if we don't do it properly or if we don't use it properly. And we have seen in the last 5-10 years many examples where even researchers, practitioners, journalists, even, and other organizations have been looking at how artificial intelligence is affecting our lives, and have even found many scandals or controversies around it. In particular, we have some examples that we all might know, such as the Cambridge Analytica scandal, like 5 years ago now, where in summary, Trump or the Trump campaign used or misused millions of data points from people, from Facebook profiles, to, let's say, to manipulate the messages they were giving to some people in particular, to try to change their minds or to change their votes. And this was a huge scandal. And in the end, it represents how artificial intelligence can be used for many things, but also for bad things, to say it like this. We have other examples where we see that, for example, big companies such as Amazon use artificial intelligence-based tools, for example, to determine whether a candidate is appropriate for a position or not. And in particular, they found, for example, that they had a tool which had a bias against women in their conclusions. And we also see some things that are maybe not that much important, but they are also very representative. So we see examples of YouTube banning system, banning some discussions or some videos because they used the terms black and white, and these were chess videos, but they banned them because they thought it was a racist slur. So there are some dangers that are associated with artificial intelligence, or at least with the algorithms that we use. No? And the things that, of course, I mean, this temporal ban of some user in YouTube because they used terms black and white in a chess video, it's not maybe the most important thing in the world, but there are some others that have a huge impact. No, so for example, Amazon not hiring women because of this algorithm, or imagine that we are using artificial intelligence to determine whether a patient has to go through surgery or not. This becomes much more important. No, and the thing is that it doesn't matter which is the problem or where is the issue. The important thing is that the issue is derived from the asymmetry of information, mostly because we are considering only, or many of these algorithms only consider the main groups, and they don't consider, or they consider with less importance, minor or vulnerable groups mostly. Okay, and in the end, what happens is that let's say that the democratic values are the ones that suffer the most. Okay, and this is the main problem that we find in artificial intelligence, and that's what Trustworthy AI tries to give an answer to. The interesting thing when we find even in the news these pieces of news about issues with artificial intelligence is that often we see that the blame is put on the tool. No? So we see headlines that say, okay, Amazon system taught itself that male candidates were preferable, or we see that YouTube's AI made a mistake. No, and in the end, we have to think that it's not the tool's problem; it's actually the problem of the one who coded it. No, let's say that often headlines, at least, put little attention on the people, because it's everything is about people here, people who wrote, who designed, and who devised these systems. No, who designed how these systems would work, and therefore, who would they affect. And we have to think that algorithms are just things, it's code, it's not something that has values, but it reflects the values and the biases of the developers and of the data that they use to train these models. And let's say that in what we see in education, or in higher education in particular, which is our focus, is that especially in technical schools, we have been, let's say, focusing on preparing people and future computer engineers or other related disciplines with, let's say, advanced programming skills, advanced artificial intelligence skills, advanced database skills, whatever. But often, and let's say most often than not, we see that the ethical and the value-based components are kind of left off. In some degrees, they are not even considered, and in some others are just let's say a side thing that is not integrated in this learning. No? And the second thing that we saw, and it's let's say the starting point of the project, is that degrees that are outside of the technical part are also like forgetting completely about artificial intelligence overall. And it's also interesting to have students, to have future professionals from other disciplines that at least understand the implications of artificial intelligence, even when they are not technical people, because in the future they might first participate in projects that are related to artificial intelligence in other fields, and second, they will be users of such systems. No? So we need also to create kind of a critical users of these systems. And as you saw in some of the examples, we are already seeing the consequences of having, let's say, professionals of artificial intelligence that don't have the tools or the skills to introduce ethical and value-based components on these systems, and of having a lot of other professionals that they simply don't have a background on basic artificial intelligence, to say it like this. So the reason of a Trustworthy AI project to exist is that we think that the higher education must play an important role in this let's say, in this development of artificial intelligence in most of the countries of the world, but in particular in the European Union, which is our scope. And we must contribute or find a way to contribute to cutting edge artificial intelligence, but artificial intelligence that is safe and it is ethical, and it kind of reflects the European values, and that's the important part here. No? So we need to prepare people with programming skills, of course, and especially on the technical degrees, but we also need to prepare students to understand what does artificial intelligence mean and what does it imply for our community, and how artificial intelligence is put to good use and how it is not put into good use. To do that, we need to empower our students, and we, let's say, we should help them identify not what we can do, but what we should do with technology, and always keeping in focus that we need to ensure that the fundamental rights and the fundamental values of our Europe are respected both today and in the future. No? And to do so, we are working on 3 main outputs for the project. The first one is a learning framework, because we first need to set the basics of what skills are needed for students to understand ethical artificial intelligence in higher education in particular, and that's something, and that's the part that we're going to talk today, both with Andrea talking about this framework, and then the interviews that are to enrich this output. And then in the coming months, we are going to work from this framework to develop open educational resources that will be used for teachers in higher education in general, so not only technical schools or technical courses, to teach these trustworthy AI concepts. And finally, a guide, we will work in developing a guide to use the methodology of hackathons to conduct ethical AI hackathons, with the idea of introducing students and helping them develop these skills, putting them to test on real life business and social problems that they will need to solve using this approach. That's all I had to say for today. So back to you, Sorry.
Thanks very much, Marcel, for the introduction to the project and for the details you provided. Now I'm going back to our slides and talking about the what's going to be in the next part. And I'm going to share the screen. My apologies. Yeah. And as Marcel mentioned, this project had different partners, number of partners, and each of the partners, they have been playing a role. In the following speaks, we are going to introduce another partner. Andrea is the representative for the UMU, and she's going to talk about the framework that has been developed, as Marcel mentioned. And then later, I'm going to have a short introduction to the other partner, which is Maynooth University. And we have been involved in some different activities in this project. I'm going to explain the role for the Maynooth University. And also later, we are going to ask our professional expert in AI, Professor Bekzadeh, to talk about the feedback. He has been supporting us by joining to the interview sessions, and he's going to present his idea about the interviews that we have been doing. And at the end, our colleague Douglas, he is going to talk about the question, is going to drive the questions for this session. And on that, I'm going to introduce the next speaker for this webinar, who is Dr. Andrea Aller-Tobela. She is a postdoctoral researcher at Responsible AI Group at UMU, with focus on the formal verification of ethical principles of AI systems. Her research expertise includes formal logic, proof theory, as well as the use of logical modeling to describe reasoning and behavior and its application in AI. She holds degrees in both mathematics from the University of Barcelona and University of Cambridge, and computer science from the University of Bath. She has held research positions in UK, France, and Sweden. And now I'm going to hand it over to Andrea to have her presentation. Andrea, to you.
Thank you. Let me share as fast as possible. Right. So I am going to basically talk about the protocol that we developed for the interviews, the reasoning about why we are conducting interviews and what we want to get out of them. And we are only just, we are well underway of developing the framework, but it's still not out. So I am going to give you a little peek, but not reveal too many details until we present it to the partners. So I will focus most of my talk on the interview. And the first thing that I think is important to talk about, which is also the basis for our project, is the European Union's ethical guidelines for trustworthy AI, because they form the basis for the aspects that we want to include in our education. So they are a very big hinge for our interviews. So I don't know how familiar our attendees are with these guidelines, but I will very briefly introduce them to you. So this is a document that was released by the European Union, I think in 2019. And it's part of the global European strategy on AI. And like Marcel mentioned, the EU has a very strong strategy on also focusing on the ethical development and deployment of intelligent systems. And so for that purpose, they put together a high-level expert group consisting of many experts from all areas of AI, but also policymakers, lawyers. So the high-level expert group was very varied, and together they wrote this document called the Guidelines for Trustworthy AI. And basically, I mean, the guidelines are a pretty hefty document. You can find them online. They have them in every single language from the European Union. But the part that we focus on particularly is the 7 requirements that they have set out that every intelligence system should adhere to. So these requirements are very nicely set out in this slide. So they are human agency and oversight, technical robustness and safety, privacy and data governance, transparency, diversity, societal well-being, and accountability. So those, I am sure, are all concepts that you are familiar with or that you have heard before. But what the trustworthy guidelines do is basically give a little bit of context as to what these requirements mean specifically for AI. And so together with the trustworthy guidelines, the EU released an assessment list, which is basically a list of practical questions, 131, I think, or maybe they have shortened it by now, that are per requirement, that when you are developing a system or when you intend to deploy, you can go through the questions and try to assess how closely you are following the guidelines. So these 2 documents are basically what informs our framework and the type of knowledge that we want our students to have. And so what we set out to do is really ask experts about what the state of the art is. Are these requirements something that is currently included in education or not? So to do that, we have our very trustworthy partners that helped us out conducting many of the interviews. And we trusted our partners as well to each select the interviewees. So the only guidance that we have given is that who is interesting to interview is basically anyone that has any stakes in higher education. Of course, you know, directors of studies or teachers for courses are right there on the trenches, so they are important. But we have also had interviews from people that are involved in the European Commission, for example. So really anyone that has a stake in AI education was welcome to participate in these interviews. And the only thing we asked from our interviewees is that they bring an education case with themselves. So what is an education case? An education case is a course or a program where discussions about trustworthy AI can take place. So of course, we said, if you have knowledge or experience with such a case, then bring a real case. Otherwise, you know, if you are a policymaker, you may not have direct hands-on contact with the program. You can use a hypothetical case. And the reason we ask that from our interviewees is basically to be able to give some boundaries to the conversation. when we had questions about what is important, you can contextualize it as what is important in the context of that case. And of course, it also gives a common topic for the interviewer and the interviewee to talk about and agree on what exactly the concepts that they are talking about are. So once we had our interviewees and they come with their education case, we conducted in the end 11 interviews in total, and you can see that we had a nice variety of countries. The numbers sum up to more than 11 because we had people with dual affiliation. But I think that we covered at least an international section. And what was really nice as well is that they brought use cases that spanned not only computer science, but also the law and medicine and social sciences. And so we can get another insight as to what kind of topics are breached in each discipline. So we want to take all of this information and we want to compare it and we want to get insights. And to be able to do that in a qualitative way, we wanted to be sure that we asked the same questions to all of our interviewees. So to do that, we basically developed an interview protocol that all of the interviewers followed and asked the same questions to all of the interviewees. If you like, you can go and see it. I can send you the link later as well. What is interesting to know is that this interview protocol was actually based on another interview protocol that my colleagues at the University developed to actually assess the usefulness of the trustworthy guidelines as they were developed. So the European Commission asked them to interview many companies together with other partners to have a feel of whether the guidelines are understood and usable by companies. And they produced a report for the Commission that is going to inform the future of the guidelines. So we had this nice interview protocol that was very useful. And so we adapted it to the education case. And we basically came up with these 7 questions. So I am just going to tell you a little bit about what kind of aspects we touched in the interview, so you can picture what an interview is like. So of course, you know, introductions, who the interviewer is. We ask some details about their background, their affiliation, and so on, so we can make the statistics that I have shown you before. We ask them about their education case. And then we really took a dive into the current status of Trustworthy AI. So we asked questions like whether they think that Trustworthy AI is currently addressed in education, whether they think there are any incentives that help it be addressed better, whether there are any national or local strategies for Trustworthy AI. And that just gives us a little bit of an outlook onto whether this is something that educators or any stakeholders have in mind right now. Is Trustworthy AI something that is at the forefront, or is it something that is not really a priority at the moment? And then we focused a lot more specifically on the assessment piece. So the first thing we want to know, also to be able to have a nicer interview, is whether, you know, how much the interviewee is familiar with the assessment list and whether they think it's generally clear and generally useful and so on. So that then when we go on to the next phases of the interview and ask them about specific requirements, we can, you know, conduct the conversation and know how familiar they are with them. And about specific requirements, that was, I think, the most illuminating part of the interviews as we analyzed them. We asked them to rank the requirements. Which ones do they think are more important and which ones do they think are less important? And also, why that is. And that gives us a lot of information about really what is, if they have to include something in education, what will that be and why? So it's really about relevance. What is relevant for their education case, for their field, for their expertise, and so on. And because unfortunately we couldn't have, you know, all the time in the world, we asked specific questions only about the topmost ranked requirements, so the one that the interviewee felt was more important, and the bottommost requirement. And we really were trying to gain some insight onto if you have to teach this requirement, what do you think are important questions about it that should be addressed in education? And really, how would you incorporate this requirement into your course? Do you think there should be any learning objectives associated to it? Do you think it's something that should require its own assessment, and so on? So in this last part of the interview, we really were trying to gain practical insight as to how would you include a specific requirement into your education. And then we ended the interview with a nice question about what our interviewees felt was most positive, which is kind of a trap question. We didn't ask about the negative aspects. I hope there weren't many, but we left some space for comments. So, okay, what are some insights that we gained? So like I said, I'm not going to reveal too much, but we did have that 100% of our interviewees said that in some form, the requirements are currently being talked about in their education case. So it is definitely not topics that come out of the blue that are, completely new to our interviewees. All of them felt that in some form or other, all of the requirements have been addressed in their education. Most importantly, when we asked about which specific requirements are already being taught, interestingly, privacy and data governance really stood out. So out of 11 interviews, 9 of them are sure that they address privacy. I mean, I guess it is a technical subject that has been around for a long time. So it is that most of our interviewees from technical subjects mentioned that this is because they study specific methods, for example, for privacy, for collecting data, and for storing in privacy preserving ways, then they felt like this requirement was very included. And on the other side, there was a lot of variety, but definitely accountability and societal and environmental well-being are the least addressed. I mean, we have 4 out of 11, 10 interviewees that gave answers to this question. And what we gathered from the qualitative analysis is that because of the abstractness of the requirement, because it is not so clear to our interviewees what well-being means or even what accountability means, and they found it more difficult to address in their teaching. And something that was also mentioned a few times is that because specific methods, for example, for accountability, which some of our interviewees related to keeping records, keeping traceable decisions and paper trails. And so because these kind of methods are not particularly developed, or there isn't particularly a state of the art, they found it very difficult to know what exactly to teach their students. So we did get some insight into why these are less taught. And you can read our report for a longer analysis of the other requirements, but I think that the trend is mainly that the more technical requirements tend to be more addressed because they can be addressed in a more practical way, through teaching specific methods to guarantee privacy or to guarantee technical robustness. But the more abstract or less technical requirements have our interviewees had more trouble understanding what it would mean to integrate them into a course. So in terms of importance, we did not have a consensus at all into what is most important to teach. In fact, we really seeing a qualitative analysis of the answers. Really, the feedback from our interviewees is that it depends very, very much on the topic of the course, what is going to be relevant. And so they do not believe that one requirement is more important than the others in general, and they do not believe that all requirements are necessarily relevant for every course. So really, the requirements that are being taught should bear a strong relationship to the course itself. What we did get from the analysis as well is that when these requirements are incorporated, especially the ones that they deem most important, normally people address them through something that has been in the news recently, something similar to what Marcel was actually talking about at the beginning. So it is when something is a social concern at the moment, then educators find it a lot easier to incorporate it in their course and talk about it. And of course, it has to be relevant to the course. But something else that is interesting is that there was at least a bit of consensus onto what was deemed the least important, which is transparency. And interestingly, a lot of interviewees said that this is because they believe that this is a requirement that is almost contained in the other ones. And so if you do the other requirements well and are clear about how you did them, then automatically you obtain transparency. And so they didn't particularly think that transparency is something that has to be taught on its own. So this is just a little bit of, an outlook of the kind of perspectives that we got from the interview. So what we are working on now is really to get this analysis of the interviews together with a literature review to produce the framework. And framework is a very abstract word. So what does the framework look like? So in this framework, we really are giving a summary of the state of the art as we gathered from our interviews and from the literature. And we are giving some recommendations on ways to move forward, also from what we have gathered from all of this feedback. And the specific questions that we address are strategies to introduce the requirements into higher education, competences, so specific skills that students should possess, resources, if there is any kind of resource or format that our interviewees felt that could be helpful. And finally, risks and opportunities as well as incentives to make sure that education on trustworthy AI moves forward. So I would be very happy to share the framework with you after we have discussed it with all the partners. And I think that's it for me.
Very much, Andreas, for interesting presentation and the results to date, and also interesting summarize of the interview results. That was really interesting. And now I'm going to start our part, talking about our part and introducing what is the role of the Maynooth University in this project. For this, I'm going to share my screen with you, and if you give me a second. Sorry, I might need to change to the other ones. Okay. Now you might see my screen, and which is about the IVI and an UIM role. Just introducing our university, the National Universities of Ireland, Maynooth, and UIM has been playing a role as a partner to this project. And in terms of the people involved in this project, the first PI for this project has been Professor Marcus Selfert, who is Professor in Digital Service Innovation in Maynooth University and also the Director of Innovation Value Institute. And the co-PI is myself, who I'm an assistant professor in Management Information System and a member of IVI at Maynooth. And also in terms of what are the activities and experience of our university in this area, we have to say that Maynooth University have had experiences of having Erasmus Plus project with 100 European universities, and also Maynooth has been awarded an Erasmus Extended Charter, and you could see the details over here. And also in terms of the role for our university, we have been involved in 3 different activities, main activities in different phases of the project. And as you could see, Maynooth University has been responsible for testing of the developed learning framework by UMU and with other users in collaboration with the leader of each deliverable. And also in the next activity that we have been involved, and it's ongoing, it has been that we are going to run some interviews regarding the framework developed by UMU, as Andrea explained earlier. And also the last role of the university, our university would be user testing, which is the biggest part of our contribution to the project. For this part, we need to do some design of the to gather the qualitative comments from the end user, and also the format will be established by our university. And also we are going to share this format with all other partners. And this is a summary of the role for Maynooth University. And also in terms of test with users, there are some more details from our side. We know that we need to share the guide with the other organization of tests, and also we will coordinate with other partners the selection and participation of 24 teachers across different universities, and to do this assessment part. And also we need to prepare the test report at the end, and also playing some roles in the user test in the hackathon as well. We need to share the guidelines for the coordination of the user testing phase with other partners and other attendees. And also we need to provide a feedback report on the questionnaire based on the questionnaire prepared by Maynooth University. These are the activities that we have been involved in them for this project. And as Andrea mentioned, we have been using the format provided to us to do the interviews, and these are the first 3 pages of the interview report that we have been using to do interviewing our interviewees. And now I'm going to hand it over to our third speaker, who is Professor Mohammad Reza Beikzadeh. And I'm going to have a short bio of him. Professor Beik is an inspiring team leader in international education and R&D organization in the field of artificial intelligence and its application. He has been designing and developing various intelligence e-learning systems during the last 30 years. He is also a dedicated senior curriculum designer, content developer, MOOC user, lecturer, and trainer in fuzzy and temporal logics, semantic technology, data analytics, and data visualization. His 30 years of experience, knowledge, and skills encouraged him to focus on working on various aspects of education to identify how artificial intelligence can help to lead and make it happen in general by designing, applying, and using algorithms, systems, and platforms since 2019. And just I'm happy to say that, as Andrea explained over there about the general planning for the details for the planning for the interviews, now we are happy to ask Professor Beikzadeh to talk about his opinion and his answers to the interview questions. Over to you, Prof. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to share my slide. Yeah. Can you? Yeah.
Yeah, looks good. It's like here. Yeah, perfect.
Okay. All right. Before I start my presentation, I would like to thank the Trustworthy that invited me for this talk and also interview. But maybe my point of view is a little bit different as a researcher and developer in AI, and also I'm a little bit close to your approach because I have to implement whatever you are going to suggest in my system. So at the end, I will give you some idea about my system that I'm working on. And at the beginning, I have very basic introduction and elaborate a little bit more a few topics related to trustworthiness and so on. And I hope this short presentation somehow fit to whatever you are looking for, at least at a very fundamental level. But anyway, I try to cover all discussion we had with, in fact, Douglas in this presentation in a very different form. So I start my presentation at this point. Basically, I feel that in future, in fact, Industrial 4.0, Revolution 4.0, is moving to this direction that we need a new era for, in fact, workers. And the market and business demand different mindset, different people with different skills. And definitely, AI should be able to help not only how to implement, in fact, the infrastructure for this industry, but also the infrastructure for education and training people for handling the business and workforce in future. So that's why these are very related. I believe before IR 4.0, we should talk about, in fact, education 4.0. And AI is the core for both disciplines. If I want to give you a very big picture about this relationship between education system, technology, and industry, so I can come up with this summarization that actually technology is being developed by vendors, by researchers, by companies, and so on. And based on the demands from the industry, and then industry needs forces, human resources, to handle the requirements and the need. So education system somehow should provide this workforce to them. So this flow of needs and demands and requirements, in fact, build up the future of society. Actually, I call it society 4.0. So if you want to do this, we can realize that not only technology, but also industry and education system should use AI to make this happen. Otherwise, industry that is moving sharply into applications of AI cannot survive, cannot realize in the future. So this is very important to know that the technology industry and education system are all depend on AI and its application. If I focus on the education system, there are so many sectors, health sectors and finance sectors and many other industries. But if I focus on the education system, we have to see what will happen to education system in future. If I want to summarize the objective of education system, is to the objective is to prepare people, in fact, to be able to do the right things and in the right way in different situations, anytime, anywhere. So this is the main objective for people to be able to do that. To identify what is the best thing to do, they have to have this ability to make better decisions, make policies for the higher level. So we can see that the education system is moving from the past to the present and future. In the past, we had one a category of teacher teaching to many people. And then now we have social media and people communicate with each other, and teachers still play the same role. And in future, this process will be totally different. Teachers and students are in some sort of environment with social media. They put contents and everybody can use it. Teachers can be a student, students can be teachers. So, but how this can happen in terms of trustworthiness, reliability, and accountability? This is very important. And nowadays you see on social media, everybody posts different posters, pictures, and texts and messages. But which one is reliable? Which one we can trust? So this is the core of the change in the future. In terms of technology, we have seen that the relationship between technology and education system has been moving to this direction, in this shape. For a while, the blue line is related to technology, the yellow line representing the changes in education. So we see that at the beginning, education didn't have much technology, chalk and talk, everything pen and paper. And then technology came to the picture, a little bit of multimedia, a little bit of social media, and so on. Then technology became a little bit stronger. And again, education moved higher than technology and cannot meet the goal of education. In our time, we had, lack of resources to read, so that we had formal books for schools and even references in the universities. But now we have massive resources for learning. So education system, traditional education system cannot work anymore in that way. And you can see that the technology is far behind demand for supporting the education. And then you can see the yellow dots moving up, and technology cannot match that one. And this is the future. And we have to think about that problem in the future, that gap, that pain. If we want to compare the education system, the conventional and traditional education system on the left, we can see that we have so many components, all the strategic planning and objectives and pedagogy and andragogy, and defined by the different ministries and education specialists, and then they design curriculums for different courses at different levels and so on. Then they set the content, and teachers should use certain tools and methods to, in fact, give certain topic content to learners, and then assess them and generate graduate. And we have a manager team to manage it at the school level, or at the regional level, or at the national level. So, but if we move to future, according to the trend that I showed you, we won't need this type of model. We need a very simple but very robust and technology-based system, which has a core of strategies and policymakers, and area of contents that have been developed according to those strategies, needs, and requirements on the business in different countries. And then we need a platform, intelligent platform, to allow different content provider and content users and managers from the market and business to send the demands and requirements, and teachers provide the content, and learners learn it rapidly and go to the market. And here, at this stage, future, we need AI. And we need a very strong AI platform to handle this, in fact, futuristic education system. Now we are going to go a little bit into artificial intelligence. My experience is that many people still, they don't have any idea what are the aspects of artificial intelligence. Some people say data scientist is artificial intelligence. Some people say logic. Some people say statistic. Some people say machine learning. Some people say robotics. And different people have different ideas or viewpoints. But if you look at the whole picture, this is the shallow AI, in fact, components that you can see here: machine learning, speech, vision, language, and planning, and robotics, and so on. These are all extension of human weakness. And actually, we develop tools in order to improve, enrich, empower, and speed up our activities. So like a car, instead of our very slow walking or running, car, we can move faster. And we cannot fly, but we build tools like airplane, we can fly, and so on. So this is another extension of our brain in order to make it a little bit better and stronger and more, in fact, maybe reliable in some aspect. So if we look at the AI, at the shallow AI, of course, not the in fact general AI, we have to see the aspect of AI. What is the impact of AI in our life? So actually, if I want to summarize it, there are 7 paths: personalization, recognition, conversation between human and human, human, machine and machine and machine, predictive analytics, all the data scientists moving to this direction in order to make decisions, goal-driven system for or data-driven leadership, future, automation, and pattern anomalies to identify the crime and so on. So at the end of the day, if I want to summarize this pattern, I can say AI is a multidisciplinary field, and it has higher impact in our life, now and future. And in order to understand better, in order to make better decisions and policies, and to enable us to be a better person, healthy, or educate better. But don't forget, AI is a tool, sophisticated tool. A knife, a weapon is simple tool. You can kill or secure. You can do surgery or kill people by a knife, right? So tool is tool. Always you can talk about misusing it. So if I want to say the fact is that we have to identify the right person, right algorithm, and right data. And when you say that there are fake problematic type of action in Google or in YouTube and so on, that is not necessarily related to bad intention. Because statistically, if you make a mistake when you model the machine learning data set, definitely you make mistake. I mean, not you, machine make mistake. Like the one that you say, okay, all the jobs should go to men, or the black people have less value compared to the white people, and so on. These are mostly statistical problems. And that's why people, they don't know how to, in fact, judge about the result of the AI. If you set the data right, if you apply the data, apply the algorithm in the right manner, because if you apply wrong algorithm on the same data, you get different results. And that is very important. And if you don't have right use case, right problem to solve based on the data, and you don't have clear model, definitely the result is wrong. And these are the key issues to consider. So when we discuss about the education in future, this is the new Bloom taxonomy, which is more to cognitive aspect of students. We can see that analysis, evaluation, and creativity coming after or higher level than applying, understanding, and remembering. So because we are moving to our higher level thinking, and the education 4.0 should move people to that direction. So we need to train them. We need to tell them how to use data for analyzing what they are going to find out based on the data, actual data. This is actionable analytics. And generate the correct insight. These are very important. You have to learn how to do it. And if you want to put everything into one graph, so I created this one, and this one is very summarized. This is almost about lots of information in one graph. So actually, if you want to think about the Trustworthy AI for education, we can have different aspects. One aspect is about the those people who develop the algorithm, the more or product or services or resources of data, and people who are conducting training. If they don't have any clear idea about what is AI, then they may misguide people. So this is one aspect for, in fact, considering the trustworthiness. These resources must be, in fact, somehow regulated in order to make sure that all the content, all the trainers, all the services, all the knowledge are at the right position for conducting teaching and learning process. The next one is about the learner. Who is going to learn based on what lab, based on what tool, based on what in fact environment. So these are also very important. We have to define all the requirements, because I have seen so many graduates from universities, even from AI discipline or category of education. So, but they did only a few Mickey Mouse example on machine learning and so on. They have no idea about what is the reality. If they make a very small mistake in gathering data, in collecting correct data and modeling them, the result is totally opposite to the reality. And that's very important. The education is very important, and people should understand the meaning of data. That is another aspect. And another one is when we are going to apply AI in different sectors, in business, we have to identify what objective we are looking for, what value or insight we are looking for, the quality, the prosperity we are looking for, the wealth that this analytics is going to bring for us. And in fact, what type of application we are going to do based on what data. This is very important. And if we don't do it right, then definitely we make mistake. And the next dimension is about the human right aspect, the security of data, the data governance, the centralized or decentralized data, the ownership of the data, access to the data. These are also very important. Maybe when we talk about the free flow of information, but is it the correct policy? What area of data should be accessed clearly by everyone, or should not be? What is the policy? What is the governance? This is another. And then this part is about what we are discussing now. We are discussing about the subject matter expert to identify what is right and what is wrong. We need to, in fact, ask correct analytical questions. And that is the art. Many people, they don't know how to translate or compile the problem into a use case. And also ethics. Ethics is the key principle for all of this. If you don't have ethics, it's like you are a criminal and you have a gun, or you are a police, you have a gun. This is a tool, very strong tool. The stronger the tool is, the more important role ethics play in that application, those applications. And then also they have to identify data as an asset. The mindset should know, should reach to this level that data is an asset, source of wealth, and they shouldn't misuse it, and they should use it properly. And of course, in terms of business, analytics should go to innovative mindset, otherwise nothing will work. So the most important thing that should support all of them is the platform and the ability to design the curriculum for education. And that is my focus that I'm going to discuss a little bit more on the development, the next slide. So these two parts can correct or support all these activities based on intelligence and very innovative design. So if you want, I want to summarize the whole stories I mentioned up to now. Learners should know what sort of data they need. If they don't know, the system should be able to help them and design curriculum automatically, which course is suitable for them based upon their preferences, based upon their level, based upon their social value, based upon the, in fact, the market needs and so on. So these learners must be able to do that. Otherwise, they don't know what to learn. I had a lot of trainees that they didn't know what to learn. I had to define a lot of curriculum and adjust it according to their background so that they can learn. And then when they learn it, it's not enough that they just learn it. They must know that this knowledge is a must. This knowledge is need. This knowledge is good to know. So after this, they must be able to apply it. And if they don't have any opportunity to apply their knowledge, they never learn. I conducted datathon for all my trainees in order to make sure that whatever I taught them, they have learned already. So this is also very important. And then at this point, they must learn what is the right thing to do according to the ethics, beliefs, social values, and understanding about the request and demand in the market, and how to do things right. For the time being, all universities and schools teach them how to do things right if they learn it, but they never teach them what is the right things to do. And this is the key for trustworthiness of education. And they must know what is the right thing to do. And this is my system that I'm working. I just give you two slides, very simple. I created the concept of massive open online micro contents, and I simplify it in form of Tetris components. And also we have a platform for identification of the strategies and decision making and policies, regulations, and so on. And also teachers should provide content or macro content, and also learners in a very personal way should use them based on their demand, their needs, their preferences, and then learning style and multiple intelligence, of course. So this platform, which I have been working on that one seriously within the last few years. And if I want to summarize the concept of education system should be different. Now, even at the philosophical and theoretical side, everyone has a simple window to the world. Different people see things in different ways. Imagine that each of these 6 pictures represent the mindset of each individual. So like the game of Tetris, I'm sure everybody is familiar with the Tetris game. With this one, you have to try to fit certain figures into the empty places in order to make sure that you know that concept and you learn it. And this is the model I follow. And each element is somehow considered as micro content. and the system should be able to build these objects, and also the system should allow the user in a personal way to put them in a place that they know that if they know it, definitely they can learn certain topics, that area. So AI again can help us to implement this one. So not only AI is a very important topic and reliable topic and trustworthy based upon the condition that I mentioned to you for the education and teaching education, but also we can build a system accordingly using AI techniques based on this model that I'm working on. In fact, to build a trustworthy system in a very intelligent manner. So this is my last slide, and I hope I didn't exceed the time, but if there are any questions, I'm very happy to answer it. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much for your interesting presentation and for introducing AI in that such a nice way. And now is the time for the panel discussion and also questions and answers. And here I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Douglas. Douglas, he is an early stage research and he's a member of a Marie Curie project called Perform. And he's going to drive this session by asking questions. And just simply saying that Douglas is working in the area of explainable artificial intelligence. And just going through, Douglas has a bachelor in computer engineering and had a master in artificial intelligence. And he was involved in AI and data science project in universities and companies in Brazil, USA, and Germany. His recent publications deal with customer behavior analytics in digital retail, explainable artificial intelligence, and fraud detection. He is currently investigating the integration of user-centric explainable AI for decision support in fraud detection workflows within digital retail and banking industries. Just saying that Douglas, with his expertise, has been helping us in doing the interviews, and I'm going over to him to go for the Q&A and panel discussion session. Thanks. Over to you, Douglas.
Thank you, Zori, for the nice introduction, and thank you all for the insightful presentations, actually. So we all know that Trustworthy AI is really important, not only nowadays, but it has been very important to be discussed. So, and I also would encourage the audience to ask questions on the chat. So please feel free to include your questions to the speakers. And we actually have one already on our chat function, which goes to Professor Mohammad. So the question is, in your scheme, Professor, how can we be sure that learners actively engage with the content and not be merely passive consumers of content? Can your conception of AI generate opportunities for reflections of those students?
You mean, in fact, the assessment of the learning, right? You mean the assessment mostly? Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, when we discussed about this system, assessment also, the definition of the assessment is going to be changed. And throughout the whole process, we can figure out whether they understood or not. For instance, when I was teaching in university, I had 3 levels of questions. One was just memorizing things, one for a little bit of understanding, and the last part was about creativity, to make sure that they know how to link and match and mix a new concept. So we can do it also using artificial intelligence in this system, and we can figure out that every single decision that they make at certain level, for instance, we put the Tetris in different positions. These are decisions, right? Every single decision will tell us that how much they know how to put certain content in certain, in fact, position that they don't know. So if one line is full and everything is okay, then like the three, that is the scoring value. So this process of value learning and making mistakes and redoing it actually is going to solve that problem. Unfortunately, the current system is very old system and is not anymore working because we learn now through social media. Every single message we read, every single clip we see, we build up something in our mind, right? Then we can make decisions. We can learn a lot of things from these small topics that we can get from the social media. So in future, we have to look at it from this point of view. And we should make sure that we know how to assess and how to evaluate every single lines of completeness and learning through this process. So I believe if we apply AI using this technique, that's why I'm 100% focused on this design. I'm going to present it hopefully in UK, in London by September, and raise funds for this one because I've been working on this topic for many years theoretically. Now I'm implementing it, and I believe it is the future of education. And that is the way I'm going to define the assessment from the very fundamental and theoretical aspect to very technical and applied domain. So I'm going to work that. Yes, it is possible. AI can help a lot and can make it very, very trustworthy.
Perfect. Thank you for the further insights. And also another interesting aspect related to the interviews highlighted, for instance, by Dr. Andrea was the diverse set of interviewees. And the next question goes exactly on this direction. So Dr. Andrea, do you see boundaries on the disciplines that we should incorporate Trustworthy AI education to? And also, what's your perspective on the when answer? So when should we start teaching that? Is it in the first years of the courses, in the end? What would be your thoughts on these?
So thanks, they are both interesting questions. I think that the first one about disciplines is a debate that is being had, but already from the European Union and from the guidelines and the white paper that came with them, the EU emphasized that they would actually like to train students from all disciplines. And the reasoning behind that is that, for example, of course, one can see why legal scholars, for example, can have a lot of input because they will be faced with a lot of new cases regarding AI and will have to check due diligence for a lot of this type of technology. But for example, the requirement about social well-being can involve a lot of impact assessments. And impact assessment is something that is, can be done from students of many disciplines, depending on what it involves. And in the same way, when we think about the design of AI, a lot of the time it's not only the computer scientists involved, but company structures contain a lot of experts, and if we move towards more participatory design, then we need a lot of social scientists with expertise to tell us who are going to be the communities that can be impacted by the system and so on. So I don't really see any boundaries in who should be involved. And for the second question as to where we should start, actually one very interesting point of consensus amongst all of the people that we interviewed is that most of them really believe that it should be even earlier, that it should be in school. Because in the end, students are not only students, but they are also citizens. And we want all of our citizens to be at least knowledgeable onto how AI works and all of the, oh, sorry, my dog is playing.
Something happened.
Yeah, sorry, she's just a puppy and she just got a new toy. But yeah, we want all of our citizens to be at least a little bit knowledgeable. So it's very important that we start earlier, and most of our interviews emphasize that. Then as to where in the university program, I think that if we learn something from these interviews is that it really depends on the content of the course. And if an first year or second year course has content, for example, about privacy that can be useful, then it should already incorporate trustworthy aspects. I don't think that there should be, a specific year where this should start.
Perfect. Thank you also for that. And another interesting side we noticed on this webinar today was from Dr. Marcel on the fact that AI is actually not new, a new concept, but it has taken off. And indeed, we have nowadays in many universities AI courses, but also ethics committees. So, Dr. Marcel, my question would be, what's your opinion on the needed processes and initiatives for actually helping universities in leveraging existing resources for trustworthy AI education?
Well, the thing is that actually, I mean, I'm going to link it to also to the interviews we conducted, because we were also asking for this to some of our interviewees, and the thing is that actually we have like two kind of issues related to that. No, first, because we are not used to use our data for this kind of decision making in universities, which would be interesting to do that. But again, I mean, we are in the European Union, and we are also kind of constricted due to our data privacy regulation. So there is a kind of a balance that needs to be achieved there. No, so if universities want to use this information and these artificial intelligence systems to take decisions, they also need to find the way or the correct way to make artificial intelligence systems trustworthy, both in let's say in the ethical way of doing good, the good and not the bad for students and for everyone, and again while preserving the privacy of their students or teachers or whatever, no, the people who you are taking the data from. No, so there is on one hand this issue, and on the other hand, when we're talking of introducing this into the curriculum, most of the interviewees actually found, at least in our case in Spain, that there is also a hard thing to overcome, that is that how our teaching is structured. No, so let's say that and this is again a balance between something that is kind of beneficial or interesting, which is the European education space and common space. So we are all trying to do the same thing, but what this has brought as a consequence is that most of the degrees have actually been like kind of thinned, so reduced to the basics. So there is a little space for additional curriculum to be added. No, so for instance, you have a degree in computer science or in mathematics or whatever, and it's only like the basics because you want to do that in 3 years, in 4 years. 3 years in some countries, 4 years in others. At least in Spain is 4 years. But again, what they did when they adapted these degrees that before they were like 5 years, they just stripped the additional subjects, no? And some of these additional subjects could be this kind of ethics things around artificial intelligence, or some other transversal subjects that could be interesting for developing our students, but there is no space for them. So let's say that the main issue was like, okay, this is interesting to have, and we should introduce this to our courses, but we don't have a space for doing so. No, so there is like this debate or that we could have about the benefit of doing so, because there are clear benefits, but how should we do that without constricting our degrees to something that it's almost like a pile of things together, you know. So I guess you follow what I mean. But that's something that has been common to many of the interviewees, and they actually in the end like said that we needed to change the higher education system overall if we want to do this properly, no? So this is something that is also interesting from their side.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Marcel, as well, the interesting thoughts. And maybe the, I would say, good question for all of you, just your final and short thoughts on how to actually integrate Trustworthy AI in higher education in the sense of having it as a whole course, sub-modules, or maybe some parts in different courses, because it's a multidimensional concept. So what would be your final thoughts on this? Maybe we can start with Dr. Andrea.
Sure. I think that if we learn something from the interviews is that most people don't believe they have the expertise to talk about all of the requirements. So it might be quite difficult to have one course, or we would have to really have people that are very knowledgeable in all of the aspects that the guidelines touch upon. So a lot of them are much more comfortable in adding the aspects that are relevant in their course and then being able to learn about those aspects more in depth. So I think that integrating them throughout all of education might be a lot easier. And that is also something that a lot of the interviews mentioned is training. That something that will be really needed to integrate it is training for the teachers, for the educators to be able to know what they should be teaching about.
Great. Dr. Mohammed, would you like to add on that? You are on mute.
I see it holistically. I believe dealing with data and AI is like mathematics. And everybody should learn it from the first year of the school. And the statistic and learning about various type of data, learning about the value of data and how they can manipulate data in order to generate values, I believe should be taught from the very early beginning to all the students. So that when they grow up, of course, they can mix it with ethics. And that is the only reason, only way to make sure that they would, in fact, consider ethics throughout the whole education. And they know how to make decisions, how to choose the best thing to do, and how to do things in the best way. So I believe the starting point should be from the earliest possible for them to learn data, to learn data analytics, to learn various aspects of AI. Of course, like mathematics, maybe from multiple major operation to very complicated integration and so on in mathematics. So they have to learn throughout the whole life. And then when they graduate, they know inside out of AI, and hopefully by then, technology has been evolved dramatically. I tell you something, when I started the AI 35 years ago, I had to run one program for machine learning 1.5 days on the workstation in Essex University. So it was the fastest computer at that time. But now I can run it on MATLAB in 2 seconds. So maybe 10 years later, we have no limit on processing power, no limit on storing data, no limit on processing. The only thing we have to do is using right data, using right technology to get the right value. So that is the thing that we have to teach them for the future.
Wonderful, thank you. And maybe Dr. Marcel, your brief final thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, no, I just, I mean, I agree what has already been said. I just wanted to add one insight that came from one of the interviewees actually, and I think it makes real sense. That is that in the end, I mean, what the interviewee did was to compare it to what has been done in the last probably 10 years or something like this regarding digital competence. So I mean, or media competence, literacy in general. So this idea of that the work that has been done from the European Commission about the guidelines for trustworthy AI, it's like the beginning or the, let's say, the first milestone, and then we need to in the coming years to, let's say, adapt them to each particular age bracket and even like degrees or disciplines, because in the end, I mean, the general population or all citizens should have an idea of them all. So there should be some kind of basic level on them. But when we adapt them to particular degrees or particular disciplines, it is probable that we need to find different, let's say, proportion of relevance on each of the requirements. No, so Andrea showed the basic results on what our interviewees felt was the most important requirement and which was the less important. But maybe if we think about legal people, the most important for them should be maybe accounting and transparency, precisely because maybe they need to go into, I mean, in front of a judge and explain why did that system take this decision or whatever. But then maybe for technical people, it's technical robustness, or maybe for, I mean, social or agricultural people, whatever, they need to be more on the, let's say, social good or whatever. No, so the thing is that that's like the guidelines that we need to further adapt to each of the scopes that we can cover in the future.
Wonderful. Again, thank you all very much for the fruitful discussion and insights. And now I would like to hand over to Zori for the final remarks.
Thanks very much, Douglas, for running the Q&A session, and thanks to all the speakers to have this interesting presentation. Just I'm going to close the session with informing you about the upcoming event at IVI. This is related to the Perform Mercury project running on June 18. Registration is free and you could join us for this event. We have more than 20 international speakers talking about different topics, and just visit our website to see the details for this event. And also stay in touch with us via LinkedIn, Twitter, and even just you could send us an email to get the newest update on the events that we are running. Again, I'm going to say thanks to all the participants to the webinar, and hope you have a nice afternoon or evening. Thanks very much. Bye, guys. Thank you.